Hello. So in this video, or this week, we are starting chapter 8, Memory. This will be most likely somewhat of a shorter lecture this week. Usually it's longer because in class I would have a whole bunch of memory activities that we would do, and obviously that's not really possible in this format, so it will be a little bit shorter than what I would have intended if this was in class. But with that said, so we will be looking at what we mean by memory and how we define that in psychology. We will then look at the different stages of memory, and then we'll spend some time looking at ways you can improve your memory, different memory techniques. And then lastly, we'll look at forgetting and whether or not, this is an important one, whether or not we can actually trust our memories. Are the memories that we pull out the same as what we actually experienced in the first place, or are they modified somehow? In which case, does that then make them less reliable? And all of that will become clear as we go through this week's lecture. So starting with what we mean by memory. So memory is an active system. So that means it's constantly active. Our memory system is constantly collecting and storing information. And it's made up of a set of processes used to encode, store, and retrieve information over different periods of time. So we'll break each of these parts down. Before I do that, a common model of memory that is used, or a common model of the brain when considering memory, is thinking of the brain as a computer. So as we go through all of each of these parts, I will talk a bit about how that is similar to the way a computer works. So first of all, encoding involves the input of information into the memory systems. This is the collection of information. We're receiving information from our senses and we're getting it into our brain. So if you think about this like a computer, this would be creating a new file. So you're opening up a PowerPoint and you're putting in your information in, or a Word document and you're typing your information in. That is the encoding part. You are getting that information into the system. Storage is then the retention of that encoded information. So you organize the information, that information gets altered, and that's what we're going to talk about in a future video, the way our existing belief systems, our view of the world, our pre-existing memories, our emotions, how all of that can alter the memory as it's being stored. So you organize it, it gets altered, and it gets stored. This is the keeping it in stage. So on a computer system, you've opened up your Word document, you've typed in your information that was encoding. Storage is then saving the file, right? Now, as far as we know, the brain seems to have unlimited storage capacity. It can actually process and store a lot of information at once. And this can occur consciously or unconsciously. So for example, when we're studying for an exam, we are consciously trying to memorize and store that information. But if I ask you what you did, a week ago, what were you doing last week, or what did you do last weekend, you might be able to think back and tell me what you did, even though at the time you weren't consciously trying to store that memory. You weren't thinking, oh, I must store this so that I can remember next week what I did this weekend. You do it automatically. If it's meaningful, then chances are you're going to remember, hopefully, what you did last weekend. Although at this point, seeing as we're all just staying at home doing nothing, maybe that'll be a little bit harder to remember. Then we've got retrieval. So retrieving the information from storage, it's the getting it back out stage. If we're again going back to our analogy of a computer, it is reopening the file, getting that information back out of storage. Now, exactly how these processes are happening in the brain is a little less clear. Scientists have formed multiple theories, so we're going to look at some of those. But looking at the brain as a computer model is one model of memory that we can use to understand this process. The thing is that there are many different ways that our brain and memory is different from a computer, especially when it comes to storing information. So, for example, when you reopen a file on a computer, it looks exactly the same as how you saved it. But as you'll see, that is not always the case with human memories. At different points in this process, our brain can make mistakes, or it can edit memories in different ways. And that's one of the things that we'll look at in a later video.